Yes, welcome to week 4. And this week we're only going to be looking at just basically one chapter this week. So I'll give you a little bit of a break in preparation for those 2 upcoming major paper assignments. So you guys should be able to start to work on those aspects of it. And I would encourage that heavily. So when we start to look at we've skipped chapter 7, we're in chapter 8 on influence of tactics of leaders. And we're going to look at these 2 aspects here of power and influence. Okay. Leadership by the nature of what it is an influential process. It has power associated with it because typically it's of the positional aspect of it. But the actual work of leadership is going to be an influential process. So that process of influence is that ability to affect somebody's behavior to change to go in a particular direction. It doesn't have to be good or bad, just to go in a direction. Now, the power aspect of this is the potential or the capacity to influence that aspect. In other words, if there's some influence, there's some force behind that influence, and that would be power. Okay, a leader, as it says here, a leader must acquire power to influence others. I wouldn't say that's entirely true, but you definitely would have to acquire some things to keep things moving. Influence tactics are important because leaders often leaders must influence others without having any formal authority over them. So when you look at influencing, that's why I said, acquiring power to have influence over somebody doesn't necessarily mean you can't lead or you can't influence. It just means that it's a little bit different in the way the process works. It's often you've actually got to gain the cooperation of workers who are who don't directly report to you. I can give you plenty of examples of these over the years. For instance, trying to get somebody in accounting to help you go over the numbers when the numbers don't match. Or getting somebody in our warehouse operation to assist with the aspect of getting goods moved around the facility, or gaining the aspect of, I have a story that I always share with this, where I was working a Super Bowl event, and this Super Bowl event I was assigned to oversee all aspects of the catering operation. And one of those managers that was assigned to my team was a general manager, and he had a problem working for a chef because obviously his idea of power was that he had power over that aspect of that. And it was necessary for me to gain that cooperation with him. Now, we reached an understanding and had some ways that we worked to gain that cooperation with him. But it was one of those that was not, that particular individual definitely didn't give me that cooperation right out of the gate. It had to be, in my case, I had to be a little bit more coerced, and basically stating that, hey, if you're not on board with me, then we need to find you another suitable job, and we'll be glad to report to your boss to do that. Another one in that same situation was a situational leadership issue where the facility needed a ton of water distributed all over the place because it got hot in San Diego that year during that time of the year where it doesn't normally get hot in the wintertime. And we had issues getting with credentialing. So I was working to gain the cooperation of an individual who was basically not involved in my operation at all, which is which was the head of security. And in that case, gaining his cooperation required more of a tactic of explaining, the way I chose to do it was to explain to him exactly where on the order, his order for goods were, mainly water, and explain to him exactly, if he didn't work with me, exactly how long it would take him to get that, which would have been something like 8 hours later. Considering that credentialing was an issue, we managed to work through those events. So those are just two examples of gaining cooperation, people who don't work for you, but you're going to have influence in one way or another to gain their cooperation. In that case, I influenced them with basically stating that we could move this process along quicker and they would get served quicker, obviously get their water a lot faster if they cooperated with my issue. The other one was just explaining to him that, hey, not everybody, he was very much a task-oriented individual. So handling that aspect of, he was there to learn parts of the operation that were not familiar to him. And those were things that he definitely had to learn. So either he worked with us or he didn't. And it would not have been good for his power structure, and we'd gone the other route. So that was a way to get that aspect of influence over him. So when we take a look at this aspect of influencing tactics, okay, you've got leadership traits, leadership behaviors in the situation. As I explained, one of those aspects of the examples I just gave was situational. Okay, it changed the influence tactics I used because of the situation. Actually, in both cases, they were. However, behaviors and traits also played an aspect in there. I didn't get angry or upset. My leadership traits and behaviors allowed me to massage both of those situations into a workable outcome. So that's where the influence there would be commitment. The outcomes there are commitment, compliance, or resistance. I can tell you on the case of the general manager, there was still resistance, but there was compliance, not a commitment. On the other one, there was definitely a commitment to make those things happen, and that was the output of influence tactics. Again, neither one of those necessarily had exhibited a lot of power. Other than the power, there was some power implied in those because the position I had did have some power, considering I was the contact of the NFL for all back of the house catering. So that gave me some power over this positional power, but not a lot. I had definitely a couple more examples of that. So power and influence, as you said, you get your possible outcomes. These are the factors that go into it, and how you manage that. Just a different way from the diagram. Okay, so now when we take a look at these aspects, influence tactics are often viewed from an ethical perspective, because you can use non-ethical tactics, and you really don't want to abuse that aspect of influence with those types of ethical tactics or non-ethical tactics or non-moral tactics. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're weighing how you're influencing it and keeping that ethical perspective and that ethical frame of reference. Okay, 3 categories of that we have, and those are honest and ethical, neutral with respect to ethics and honesty, with the respect to and they're not manipulative. Those that are essentially manipulative and dishonest. So basically, you can be honest and ethical, you can be neutral, and you can be essentially manipulative and dishonest. Now, you can make the argument that in those cases I was manipulative. However, I did that, but I was not dishonest in any way, shape, or form. The outcome of that influence was not negative. It was still honest and ethical, or maybe neutral. Okay, but yeah, was it manipulative? Yes. But sometimes that tactic you can use a manipulative tactic, but it still be essentially honest and ethical. And again, it's that influence there that you exhibited over there. Some people under the ethics, like I said, could make that argument that was manipulative, but I would say it was more exerting influence of those aspects of what I had available, the resources I had available to me at the time. So, because when you look at honest and ethical tactics, this is what you're looking at. For example, respect and trust. Okay, using rational persuasion. Okay, and this is really kind of going back to my 2 examples. This is where I would say was making those types of influence tactics. That was definitely part of my equation, usually a rational tactic. Establishing connections, legitimating a request or legitimizing a request. Okay, so again, back in to use that water example, I was legitimizing a request. Exchanging favors, bargaining. I've used many times, especially dealing with people external to my team. Making a personal appeal, definitely one of those things that kind of works. It definitely works along those lines. I'm on the other side, practicing hands-on leadership, being a team player, consultative forming coalitions. Again, all of those, a lot of these honest and ethical tactics, I've employed over and over again. Lots and lots of individuals have became a team player or formed a coalition with me. I consulted with people outside there, and typically I always give you feedback. Those are the ways that we kind of look at those things. Here, I want you to take a look at Colin Powell, a key influential general. But he has a very interesting YouTube video out there that I think you would be really interested in, that you really should go ahead and click on and watch, to take a look at those aspects of how he views leadership. Again, he has some very surprising ones considering the era he came up with in the military. His entire career was in the military. And I think you'll find that very interesting. This is not something that's inside the text. This is something that I had in, because I think it was really important for you to take a look at. And we'll take a look at neutral tactics, okay? Joking, again, that humor aspect is really, can get the message across without actually being angry, okay? Ingratiation, okay? Basically buttering somebody up, flattering them up. I don't do that. I've never personally used this one as much. I do use humor quite a bit. Ingratiation, buttering somebody up, that's not really in my management toolbox, although I have seen other managers and leaders use it. And they use it well. I'm not high enough on the charisma scale, I would say, to use ingratiation. So, but you can use that as you go there. Repeal. The leader exerts influence on a team member by getting a person with more formal authority to do the influencing. I've definitely used that one. And I'll side note a little bit of another story here in the regards to this is that using upward appeal is, I worked the first post 9/11 Super Bowl, a very interesting event on many tactics, on many sides. I used upward appeal in this case where I was assigned, even though not the most senior manager at the time, but I was assigned to attend the security briefing with this unit, United States Secret Service, because they were in control of the security for the event. As it wrapped up, I met with the lead Secret Service agent, and who was giving the brief, and said, there's parts of this plan that doesn't work for us. Okay, our plans need to be a little bit more flexible, or 4 o'clock when it comes around, people who are very influential will not have food. That's just the way that our world works. What can we do to make this work? And we worked out a solution, and then he hands me his card and says, I won't be here tomorrow, but when you come in, if you have an issue, tell them to call me on my phone, on the jet phone, because I'm on my way to Salt Lake City. I said, okay, I appreciate that. Of course, the next morning when we walked into the building, the agents that were there were not allowing us in because it was before the time of opening. And he promptly whipped out this card and said, who has the phone? Who's going to call him? And then without even actually having to call him, a gentleman in a black suit walks out of the shadows, no pun intended there, actually right out of the shadows, materialized and says, we're not calling him. Go ahead and let them in. Okay, so that's an upward appeal example. Okay, I gained the influence by making my case to the lead agent, and we were able to get that authority moving. Again, that was the use of upward appeal. Co-opting antagonists, figuring out ways to get people who don't want to be with you to join forces with you. This is kind of fun. I'm kind of laughing because this is kind of a fun one. But actually, I can get people who don't necessarily agree with you, but actually can bring something to the table. I can show them what they can bring to the table, even though they might not agree with the way they are, or they might agree with the team. That can happen and does work. Now we're getting into Machiavellian, and gentle manipulation of people and situations. Typically, some of this kind of walks the line between neutral and good, and this gentle manipulation is definitely one of those that kind of fits into that. It could go either way. Okay, going too far, you're going to be right on. You're going to be right into, you're posing into this aspect of Machiavellianism. And Machiavelli is this. Machiavelli was a guy, obviously Italian, who had a tendency to want to control the interactions of others. And typically he would do this by practicing bluffing and deception and other types of manipulation tactics for his own gain. And that's where it really goes into the unethical. Is these others are, again, about the individual's own gain. So like debasement, which is insulting or demeaning somebody, exerting undue pressure over somebody because you want them to do something. Either bribes or threats for compliance. No, and most of the time it's threats. These are things you want to stay away from because, again, actually in the same age, that means litigation. Leaders in organizational change, okay? We have to be changed as leaders, need to be change agents, okay? Both change agents for individuals and change agents for our culture, organizational culture. And these are just some examples on how you can actually impose and sort of elicit change. But we want to make sure that we're doing this and pushing we want to make sure we're always pushing forward, okay? Always pushing forward. This is something that you really want to think about and how to change things for the better. And these are just examples of how we can do that as leaders, okay? So, implicit leadership theory, okay? Implicit is this kind of aspect of, these are some traits when you're looking at things that happen implicitly. And this is a tactic I've used from time to time, which allows you to kind of be able to push people forward in transitional and transformational leadership. So, these are some aspects of what an individual would be that could use implicit leadership, which means you kind of throw it out there and you kind of let the team run with it, okay? And typically what you can do is, these are the characteristics that you have to really employ that. Sensitivity, intelligence, dedication, charisma, strength, well-dressed or attractiveness, trustworthiness, and creativity. Okay, these are all aspects of, if you notice, they apply to most of the relationship theories. Okay, you're not seeing a whole lot of things that are different here than any other relationship theory. The only difference here is with implicit, you can kind of throw that out there. I used to throw out ideas and then let them kind of run with it. That's an aspect of influence there. Now, if you want to use implicit leadership the other way, then you're looking at things like tyranny, where you're dominant and manipulative and selfish, and you're using those aspects of getting them to do what you want, but you're using it for your own good. That's definitely not what we want. That kind of wraps up this week's week 4, and we'll be moving into week 5, and I'll be back with that.